The United Nations says there's an estimated 258 million widows in the world today, and nearly 1/10 of them live in extreme poverty. In many parts of the world, including in Africa, widows go through trauma, emotional distress, not only dealing with the loss and grief of their spouse, but also the sudden experience of economic insecurity, stigma, discrimination, as well as harmful traditional practices. Hello, I am Orion Itangishaka, and this is Our Voices. On today's program, we will closely look at the lives and experiences of widows. We'll learn about some of their stigmas, shameful experiences, emotional and financial challenges they endure after losing a spouse. We'll also examine the progress or the lack thereof on legislation regarding land rights and inheritance. Widows are often subject to rituals such as cleansing, where they are required to drink the water of which their dead husband's body has been washed, having their heads shaved, having sex with an in-law, which makes them susceptible to HIV and AIDS and STDs, to name a few. Some widows are saying enough is enough, demanding not to be humiliated any longer through inhumane rituals and asking for respect as well as what is rightfully theirs after the death of their husbands. In July 2020, over 250 widows took to the streets in Western Cameroon in the town of Bufumsan to call to an end to cleansing rituals and other cultural practices they say have been forced upon them following their husband's death. To discuss more on these treatments and what some organizations are trying to do to support widows in their distress, I spoke to Amy Banda, a well-known journalist and founder of Target Peace, an organization fighting for the rights of widows in Cameroon. I began asking her more about some of these traumatic experiences that widows go through.
The treatment given to the widowers in Cameroon is not the same treatment given to the widows in Cameroon. Most of them are coerced into sleeping with the brothers of their late husbands. Sometimes they are coerced into drinking the water with which the body of the corpse was washed. Sometimes they are coerced into marrying forcefully the brother of the late husband if they must keep the possessions, property that they worked with their husband for the good of their children and a brighter future of their children. When a woman is separated from the husband, her best half, like most of them do call them down here, she is not come to terms with that bitter reality, and so she needs a lot of understanding. She needs a lot of support. She needs a lot of assistance. She needs a lot of care and caution. When the same woman turns around and she gets blow from the society.
Now, for your organization, Target Peace, what is your main focus, the main area of focus for assistance to the widows at the moment? And what are some of the challenges that you're facing right now in trying to help?
It's in our priority to take her from the place of grief to a place of growth, from the place of pain to a place of gain. Trauma is always your next best friend, given that society tags them names, witches, and all of that. Target Peace comes to remind them, you're not witches, you are our mothers, you are dynamic, phenomenal African women of African, Nigerian, Ugandan origin, wherever. And so we're coming here to show you love. Don't you forget that we are your children. So we're going to support you. We'll walk this journey together. But please, you need to give yourself a second chance. And that's the reason why we had kids like Mrs. Ngwasa, with whom I worked since 2012 from Douala. And she used to tell me, Safes,
it's been 35 years. I don't think I can remarry.
And I tell her, there's always a chance. There's always a second chance. And today she is Mrs. Mukoko. She no longer says
The widow.
Ngwasa. That means she's given herself a second chance. She's not been restricted by traditional barriers, preventing her from giving her emotions a right to exist. Economically speaking, empower her in little traits that will enable her to become self-reliant. Most of all, become a peace ambassador. It's very important for us to know that no widow inflicts pain on another widow. because she suffered from pain.
Ms. Banda, you recently had different activities throughout the country to empower widows in commemoration to African Women's Day. What were some of the activities and the reactions from the widows that you were able to empower, to help during those days?
We organized a special event to celebrate the African woman in the widow on the 31st of July 2021 in the northwest, the west, the littoral, and the southwest regions of Cameroon. The discussions we had on July 31st, 2021 in the northwest, west, southwest, and littoral regions, these women understood that they've been through pain, but they have to choose to shun hate. They need to defy hate, and they need to build a hate-free Cameroon. That means they must be conscious. They must be conscious enough to do things that will help them become economically self-reliant, empowered, so they can take decisions for their children, for the society.
That was Amy Banda, a journalist in Cameroon and a founder of Target Peace, an organization that advocates for the rights of widows in the nation. We have to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll take a look at how new legislations in some parts of the continent have been able to help women and advocate for them in their rights to keep their matrimonial properties and more. That and more is after the break on Our Voices. Don't go anywhere. Nigeria's Supreme Court in late August upheld the right of female children to inherit property from their fathers, a ruling that has shaken traditional male-only inheritance in some ethnic groups like the Igbo. While rights activists celebrate the ruling as an advance for equity between the sexes, some critics say the Supreme Court ruling attacks traditions and customs. Timothy Obwezu has more on this report from Abuja.
Rolling up balls of locust bean preparing for the market, Nkiruka Ani is starting again trying to pick up the pieces of her life. In March, she was excluded from her family's assets during the sharing process that followed Igbo customary practice which forbids women from family inheritance.
I believe that we all humans, anything that they give to male ones, they should give also to the female ones. Nobody, as in, we are equal, but I don't know their own mentality. Maybe the female are not, they are not, I don't understand.
The age-long practice is based on the idea that a female child will get married and leave her home to join her spouse. Many women like Annie have been denied money and property because of the practice. But in late August, Nigeria's Supreme Court, in a landmark decision, annulled the tradition, saying it was discriminatory and contradicts the constitution of the Nigerian state. The decision was celebrated by gender equality advocates like Solomon Buchi.
Constantly weigh culture on the scale of objectivity, on the scale of fairness, on the scale of justice, on the scale of equality and equity. Is it fair to people? Is it just to people? Is it equitable? Is it compassionate? We don't want to call it our culture, or we are not going to pride in a culture that dehumanizes.
But some who favor the tradition object to the Supreme Court's ruling and warn it could attract punishment from the gods.
Properties should be shared among men, because that has been something our forefathers has been doing for so long, and it has been working. It has been working like that, and I don't think our women are complaining.
It's left for the boy child now to consider the girls and give them some.
But the chairman of the Abuja Council of Igbo Traditional Rulers, Ezudo Uche Egenti, urges monarchs to support the Supreme Court judgment.
The Supreme Court has spoken. It is proper for you and I to go by the laws of the land. And I wonder why it's just on Igbo land. You understand? Which means the North, the South, they are not practicing the same thing we are practicing.
Some say implementing the court's ruling on tradition will be slow and difficult, but gender equality advocates will be observing the progress. Timothy Obizu for VOA News, Abuja.
Widows aren't the only ones seeking what is rightfully theirs. Marriages in Zimbabwe are customary rather than legal unions that, if ended by divorce or death, leaves the women empty-handed. But a court ruling last year granted women the right to equal property if the marriage is registered. Columbus Mavunga reports from Chitungwiza, Zimbabwe.
When 39-year-old Juliet Gwenere's customary marriage of 12 years ended in 2016, she was left with 5 children to care for and no property or support from her ex-husband. She was forced to move in with her mother in Chitungwiza town southeast of Zimbabwe's capital, Harare. Gwenere once had 3 daughters not to make the same mistake she made when they get married.
Men will not give you anything. They'll just say you just walk out like the way that you came. You came with nothing, so you're just going to go back with nothing. So at least if you stand on your 2 feet, if you've gone to school, if you're empowered, if you've gone to school, if you've got a job and everything, and I don't think any man can actually say you can go with nothing.
Most marriages in Zimbabwe are customary and registered unions that give no legal protection or inheritance rights to women if the union ends. A Zimbabwe Supreme Court ruling last year granted women the right to equal property if the marriage is registered. The legal rights group Women Lawyers of Southern Africa, Zimbabwe, says they are noticing more women becoming aware of their rights since the change in law.
Most of our clients who visited our offices expressed their confidence in the judicial system, especially with regards to their right to protection by the law, which is a constitutional right. They even expressed that they've got the right to equality now with their male counterparts.
But rights advocates say women, especially in the countryside, need to be educated on the importance of marriage registration.
We have a lot of work cut out for us, or civil society, gender equality advocates need to continue with advocacy. We need to engage with the lawmakers. We need to engage with judges in terms of the promotion of women's rights. We need to engage them in terms of judicial activism or even interpretation of some of the normative frameworks that are out there that promote women's rights.
While Zimbabwe's wheels of justice tend too slowly for women like Gwenere, there is at least a more hopeful future for equality and legal protections for her daughters. Columbus Mavunga for VOA News, Chitungwiza, Zimbabwe.
To discuss with us more about legislation that begins to enable slowly but surely women in other parts of the continent is Faith Alube, land justice advocate and human rights lawyer in Nairobi, Kenya. I began asking her some of the progressive legislations that women can refer to in terms of land right and inheritance in Kenya.
We have laws like the Land Act of 2012 that acknowledges the gender principles when you're valuing land in matters compensation. We have the Land Registration Act of 2012 that talks about women being entitled to be owners, even if their names are not on the titles. The law perceives them as beneficiaries because the name on the title is viewed as a trustee. We have the Community Land Act of 2016, which is very progressive because Kenya is 70% communally owned. Under communally owned lands, traditional governance systems do not really recognize the role of women. So women have generationally been excluded from land governance. So this Community Land Act of 2016 is very progressive in a sense that each adult in a community has a vote. It's not a family head, because before then, the eldest male in a family would hold in trust But Community Land Act of 2016 provides that every family member has one vote. So the women who've been married into the home, the women who've been born in the home, they have a vote. It further provides that women should be part of the small community land management committees, something that never used to happen. Okay. Women should be part of the natural resource governance committees. Okay. So I'd say in terms of legislative framework, we have very beautiful pieces of legislation. I wish they could have been enforced as envisaged.
A will seems like a very strong protection mechanism for women. What are the challenges that you've seen associated with putting together a will in a marriage that can protect a woman after the husband passes, especially if there could be family members that might want to acquire the land of the late spouse? Is a will a good idea? Is it practical? Is it possible in an African context?
It is practical. It is important, but it's not absolute. It can actually be revoked and some of the property be reallocated to family members. Maybe, let's say, the children, they call it legitimate children. So it is practical and it happens. But in the Kenyan context, you get that people feel when you write a will, you're inviting death. So you get that very many people, very many spouses die intestate. So when they die intestate, then that aspect of family sitting down and deciding who would be the administrator comes in. Even for years, that issue of bride price normally comes up again and again and again. So there's that aspect of linking how if a woman is a wife first, before we even start talking about the woman having the right to possess the matrimonial property that her husband has left her with. And remember, there is the issue of inheritance and there's the issue of possessing matrimonial property that both the husband and the wife have equal share to. So the claiming of that right is what is usually compromised because not so many women are willing to go the whole hog because of the complexities and the fear of the unknown.
What can government do, in your view, that could facilitate some of those things? Would pro bono lawyers be of help? Or what can be done, in your view, on the government level?
Of course, the government, what they can do, number one, is to simplify the discussion, simplify the discourse, simplify the processes. The succession process is very expensive, it's lengthy, it's adversarial. The backlog in most of these courts discourage widows from going through that process. The government can also develop multi-stakeholder forums at local level, which then would simplify the discussion and make the widows in most areas own the discussion. There's the issue of resourcing of the women land rights agenda. They help women access and own land. A land registrar should not register a community that has not adhered to the law. That would empower women to be able to make decisions around land, around natural resources. And lastly, the issue of supporting women to access credit in order to improve their livelihoods.
Are widows in your communities treated fairly and with dignity by family members after the loss of their spouses? Are there laws meant to protect them and their matrimonial properties? Tell us more about this on our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Our handle is @VOA Our Voices. We're also on WhatsApp. Our number is right there on your screen. When we come back, we'll look into widowhood as one of the casualties of conflict and war. Stay with us.
We're bringing women's voices to the conversation, and more than that, we're building a community of inclusion and empowerment.
Here in Kinshasa, campaigns to raise awareness against the spread of coronavirus are common, but getting that information to people who have no access to water, electricity, or money can be a challenge.
We are here at Kalerwe Market in Uganda, Kampala, where in this whole market, women are crying out for their situations to change.
For women, it will be better for us.
I think a big thing for me is just being able to say that when these protests are happening, does it turn around into policy?
Our kids are raped every single day.
This movement got the government to listen. It really was powerful because it showed what is possible when men and women band together and say, enough is enough.
It's not necessary anymore to climb on a car. I can be in any place to cheer with the people.
Conflict is often the catalyst for widowhood. According to the United Nations, it's reported that in some parts of the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, around 50% of women are widows, mostly due to the years of conflict. In northern Mozambique, a brutal insurgency has also forced hundreds of thousands of terrified civilians to flee their homes, many of them women who lost their husbands in the violence. Andre Baptista reports their struggles from 2 camps of displaced people in Cabo Delgado province. It's narrated by Amancio Vilanculos.
Mwaziza Adris huddles in a tent, caught up in pain and uncertainty.
I just cry. Until now, I cry.
The 38-year-old has grieved since her husband's death last year when armed men caught and beheaded him in the Mozambican village of Ngorongoro.
There were so many attackers. They were armed with guns and machetes.
Adris escaped, walking for 7 days with the couple's 5 children and 2 nephews. They wound up at Boa Viagem, a makeshift camp in the coastal town of Palma, near Mozambique's northern border with Tanzania. Violent insurgents emerged in Cabo Delgado, a poor but mineral-rich province, in late 2017. Since then, they have killed at least 2,000 people and uprooted 670,000, the United Nations says. VOA visited Palma, home to a French-famous massive natural gas project, 6 days before the insurgents struck there March 24th in their biggest attack. The government claimed it had regained control of the town within several days, but thousands fled by land and sea. VOA was unable to follow up with Mwaziza Adris. More than 350 kilometers to the south lies Impire, another camp for the displaced. Rodrigues Adamu is an informal spokesman for his neighbors there.
They have seen their husband chased and killed. They have seen their children dying. They remember playing with children they no longer have. They don't have their husband. They suffer trauma.
Delfina Zubeiro's school-teacher husband was killed last May. Insurgents mutilated his body and threatened Zubeiro's when she tried to bury him. She ran. Now 28, she says she finds support among Imperi's camps. Others were widows.
I was totally lost. Even now, all I can do is cry.
The conflict has left females vulnerable to kidnapping, rape, forced marriage, and prostitution, the United Nations says. Safety is hard to guarantee. Meanwhile, Mozambique's Minister of State Administration, Ana Kumwana, said this week that the government has a plan to provide humanitarian aid and economic opportunities to the displaced. For Andre Batista in Cabo Delgado province, Amancio Vilanculos, VOA News.
We move to Burkina Faso, where non-profit organization Gopaga is helping widows and orphans grappling with the loss of husbands and fathers to build their lives after escalating conflict with Islamist militants. Henry Wilkins reports from Ouagadougou.
Some 1.3 million people have been displaced in Burkina Faso's conflict since it began in 2015, and more than 6,000 killed, according to the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project. Burkinabe military personnel are among the dead, killed fighting terror groups linked to Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. Loretta Ilbudu is the widow of a soldier killed in that fight.
It was the 24th of December, 2019. We were preparing for Christmas. His uncles arrived in the morning, but I was not informed of his death until about that evening. I suspected something, but they didn't tell me anything to begin with.
Her husband died during a terrorist attack on the town of Arbinda. The couple had a daughter who was just a few months old at the time.
He was a nice person, a bit shy and very serious about his work. He spent a lot of time with his family. We used to go on outings on his days off.
A non-profit called Gopaga is helping widows like Ilbudu. Its pilot project, launched in February, provides them with support so they can make a living.
Ce programme apprend aux femmes à pêcher.
With this program, we teach them to fish. We don't give them the fish. It's about empowering themselves and their children afterwards. The aim is for Burkina Faso to have a system of care that supports what the state already provides for these widows.
Terrorism victims like Ilbudu face complex issues, says United Nations Special Rapporteur for protecting the human rights of terrorism victims.
So we get a lot of good wishes on victims of terrorism, and we get a lot of expressions of great sorrow for their sorrow. But in many ways, and I think we'll speak directly about widows, the reality is that victims of terrorism, particularly women who've been victims, need concrete and practical supports.
Today, Ilbudu is an intern at an insurance company. She hopes to be fully employed so she can support her daughter.
Now I feel ready to move forward. I wish other women had this chance like me.
Beginning in September, Gopaga plans to roll out its programme to support all military widows in the country. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso.
It's time for our Women to Watch segment, the segment where we feature women who are doing extraordinary things in their communities, nations, or worldwide. This week we have our eyes on Faith Alube. Yes, after speaking with her and learning more about her work, we share with you more of who she is and her work in the community. Faith Alube is not only the CEO of Kenya Land Alliance, she's an attorney and a human rights advocate for the last 15 years. Mrs. Alube has extensive experience in working with women on the topic of land right, economic empowerment through mining, and gender-responsive land policy regulation. She oversees the Transitional Justice Program for Kenya's Human Rights Commission. In addition to providing pro bono legal services to residents in Nairobi's low-income neighborhoods and rural areas, she is the weekly host of a radio call-in show called Know Your Right on Radio Jambo Kenya. There, she provides free legal advice to community members seeking answers about land right, matrimonial properties, inheritance, and the like. Now that's a woman to watch. And that's where we end our show this week. To catch up on the latest episode of Our Voices, go to VOA's website on voanews.com or YouTube. Thanks for watching Our Voices. On behalf of my colleagues and everyone here at VOA, Oriani Tangishaka was with you today. Thank you for watching. Good day.